Now we're having a speech by Alina Jaffery about the 4 arts of language arts. Alina Jaffery had a bitter taste of different educational systems growing up. And then she came to the realization that for our children, there must be a better option. Amongst her favorite pastimes are reading aloud to her kids, which has developed into a deep love of reading in her own trio. She believes in the holistic power of homeschooling, not just to educate, but to strengthen the bonds of family. She is a mother to 3 wonderful kids, ages 7, 10, and 4. And her goal is to nurture a love of lifetime learning, a profound respect for the gift of knowledge, and above all, to raise strong Muslims who live a life which the Rabb is pleased with. So now we're going to welcome Sister Alina Jaffery.
So subhanAllah, this turnout is incredible. For those of you that were here last year even, it was not this much. It's so overwhelming because most of us who started, we were completely alone. It was really like an isolating journey. So subhanAllah, those of you who are thinking about starting or who have already started, may Allah put barakah in it and facilitate you. I'm so happy to see so many people interested in homeschooling. Like, this is amazing. There's power in numbers. We can do so much together, learn from each other and our experiences. It's amazing, subhanAllah. I just wanted to say that. It's just really, really nice to see so many people, subhanAllah. So thank you for coming. So I wanted to talk to you guys today about language arts. This is a really nebulous area for most people. I always loved language arts, and I always was very good at writing, and my son was an early reader, and he had amazing comprehension, and I just thought, okay, this is like an amazing spot for me. This is my spot. But such was not the case. When my son started writing, his writing was not good. I'm sorry, Adam's here right now. But it was actually very, very, I assumed because he was such a strong reader and such a good, he had such high comprehension level, I would be able to read him those books that are like encyclopedias, and he was getting concepts at age 4. And I was like, okay, this kid doesn't need to work on his writing skills. So, but then when it came time to write, he wasn't writing very well. So when it was time to homeschool my daughter, I overcomplicated the entire system, and I made it very, very complicated, and neither was effective, because either you overcomplicated or oversimplified, neither is good. So subhanAllah, after many years of trial and error, it's actually quite simple. The effect of language, simplicity is amazing in all areas of homeschool. Actually, I try to simplify every part of my life, but really, language arts is actually quite simple, and the school system and the modern approach is actually quite complicated. The language arts itself is actually quite simple. So we're going to talk about that today. Okay, so in the traditional school setting, this is what it looks like. This is language arts in a nutshell. It's phonics, reading comprehension, spelling, writing, punctuation, grammar, vocabulary. So this is language arts. I'm not saying that these are not components of language arts. However, it shouldn't be separate like this. Language arts should be a holistic approach. And whether you were in public school or any school actually, or you were at a convention and you pick up a language arts book, this is what it looks like. This is the modern way that it's taught, and this is no good. It's not an effective way to teach effective communication, writing. It should all be integrated. So that's what we're going to talk about today. In the classical sense, this is the 4 arts of language arts. And the first one, the most crucial one, which I'll be talking about extensively today, is listening. And then speaking, then reading and writing. So you'll see that listening and speaking, when I was doing the research, I don't even know that was part of language arts. But in the traditional sense, it's key. Listening is key for language arts. And we'll talk about what that means, of course, extensively. But all the other subjects like punctuation, grammar, all of those other things should be combined and integrated. So basically, with this, my husband had a really good example. He said this is like giving a child or anybody, giving somebody a bunch of ingredients and telling them to create the recipe without a recipe. It's just different parts. There's no holistic, cohesive nature to it. Whereas this is a cohesive way to teach language arts, and it's very, very lasting, and the effects, inshallah, will create competent readers and readers, writers, communicators, inshallah. So the reason that listening and speaking are no longer in the realm of public school and just school in general, is because it's really hard to gauge how well if you have a classroom full of 30 kids, how is the teacher expected to know how each child is listening? That's the problem. And it was taken out because the schools are getting too big, administrations are, breathing down these poor teachers' necks. There's no way that you can gauge how well a student is listening. So listening and speaking were basically chucked out of the curriculum, maybe 40, 50 years ago. But this was a very huge proponent of language arts, and it was chucked out. And unfortunately, the competence in the latter two are predicated in the former two. So the better you listen and speak, the better you will actually read and write. And unfortunately, it's prerequisite to reading and writing, and we completely chuck out the first steps. So that's inshallah what we're going to talk about today. So there's the direct connection between the ability to listen and the ability to read, and the direct connection between the ability to speak and the ability to write. So we're going to talk a lot about listening, and I know that even my close friends, I talk a lot about the listening aspect because when I found it, I really became in love with the nature of listening in our homeschools. We do a lot of listening, and I'll talk about what listening we're doing. So listening is the natural. So the listening aspect is the natural acquisition of language is primarily through the ear. Auditorily, the words that your child is gaining, it's going to happen through the ear. So the modern school system is your child needs to read. It's the holy grail of the school system, but it's actually not very effective at all. The child needs to be hearing these words, hearing rich language. So actually, before I even get into that, the average child, how are they actually receiving their language? How are they? It's through television. I was looking at a statistic. Now, I don't think this is at all true for homeschooling families. I don't think I know anybody that lets their kid watch this much TV. But for an average child, 25 hours of television that's the statistic. That's a scary amount of hours and that's what they're picking up. And even television that is for adults, it's written at a 3rd grade level. So you can imagine for kids how they're dumbing it down. So that's not an effective place to expect your child to pick up vocabulary. Peer interaction. So schools, Noor was talking about age segregation. That's the worst place for your child to pick up. So school kids, I mean, you've talked to a child from public school. I mean, they say that our kids are awkward, but have you heard a child from public school talk? It's really, really terrible the way they talk, because even the most intelligent child is dumbing themselves down to the lowest common denominator because it's not cool to be smart in school. I've been to school, I know. And so even the most intelligent child, they're going to dumb themselves down. And then there's family interaction, which is us talking to our kids, or rather barking at our kids. Clean your room, brush your teeth, do your work. That's not good grammatical English. That's not very rich English. So these are the areas that the children are receiving language. Are these effective? Absolutely not. The only place that they're getting effective language is through reading aloud. And like I said, I'm going to go deep into this because it's the most effective use of your time as a parent in the language arts area. And actually, I wouldn't just limit it to language arts, really everywhere. Language arts is extremely beneficial. So what the child needs more than anything, in order to be equipped to be ready to write or whatever, they need a database, a storehouse of reliably sophisticated language patterns. Now, that's like a lot of words, but what that basically means is if you want them to be able to write, they need to have fuel. We don't expect a car to go without fuel, right? We cannot expect a child to write who has no ideas. So you put those stories in their lives, a lot of ideas, beautiful language, plots, characters, and then you see their writing improve. But without that powerhouse, that storehouse, you're asking a child to do what he doesn't have the ability to do. It's so critical that the child is listening to a lot of good literature. And that means that it's our job to expose them to this. Now, we can harness technology in our favor. We can use audiobooks and those things that will help us, so we don't have to be the ones reading it. But I encourage you to make sure you're listening to those audiobooks with your children, because we'll talk about conversation also, and you have to be part of the equation. But anyways, so hearing words that don't ordinarily come up in a round of conversation expands a child's vocabulary faster and better than anything else. And I've seen this time and time again when my 7-year-old here, she's listening to The Hobbit, and she's understanding all of it, and she can understand the very hard words because she's putting up the context clues. They can deduce the meanings just by listening to these stories. You don't underestimate the brilliance of a child. You can read very high literature to them, and they will get it. Don't read and don't waste your time with any books that are not high quality. Find the best stories and share those with them. And this is going to enrich their vocabulary. There's nothing else that's going to be effective. They're reading it themselves. It's not going to enrich their vocabulary, unfortunately. I don't know why there's such a push to read all the time in the school system, because I was talking to a friend the other day whose child is in school. They have to complete 20 books over the summer, which is, a lot of books, but it's really doing no good. And they can't say, okay, we'll have the parent read 20 books to the kids. That would be impossible. But this is where it rests upon us. We can use technology. We can use audiobooks. I'm a huge proponent of audiobooks. But the child needs that fuel. That's their eventual fuel for writing and written expression. It comes through books. And also, not just the powerhouse for writing, but it actually increases literacy in emergent readers. So children who are just learning to read, they cannot make the connection. They cannot put a word together if it didn't already exist in the mind. And I want you to think about that for a second. If you are looking at a new word, if it didn't exist in your mind already, could a child be expected to decode it? The reason that they're decoding is because they are aware of that word already. So even a word like sleigh, not the youth sleigh, but like a sleigh, like you sit in, on the on the ice. That's a hard word to decode, right? But if they've heard it and they know that EIGH that's the word that makes the A sound, then they're going to be able to say sleigh because they know that's a word that exists. But if they had no idea that that word exists, then they couldn't decode that word. So even the younger kids, they need the read-aloud experience because it's going to be able to allow them to pick up literacy faster. And sometimes it takes time. As wonderful my daughter's comprehension is, she struggles in reading. It's tough for her. Alhamdulillah, we've had a lot of strides in the summer, but be patient. You'll have slow readers. That doesn't mean that they're less smart. Some of the most intelligent, like Andrew Pudawa, the founder of IEW, his son didn't start reading till 13, and this man created a language arts curriculum. It's not that he didn't know how to teach language arts or reading, but don't gauge a child's success or rather their intelligence by if they're early readers or not. Because my son started reading at 3, and my daughter started reading just now at 6, 7, and I think that their comprehension is the same. They're at the same level. So that's not a good measure. Moving on, comprehension. Now that's a big one, reading comprehension. I know in the school system, it's all about reading comprehension. Does your child understand what they're reading? So reading aloud to children at levels above their decoding skills is the #1 way to assist in building comprehension. So basically, just because my daughter wouldn't be able to read Tolkien doesn't mean that I shouldn't read it to her and she couldn't understand it. Because her decoding level may not be that high, but her comprehension level could be. So when we keep the child at the level that they can read at, we're doing a grave disservice to them. So it's really important to read to them above their level. And this is a line from a book I took out. When we do the work of decoding for our kids, when we read a book aloud and take on the work of figuring out correct rhythms, cadence, and voice for each line, the child listening gets to spend their mental energy in a different way. They enjoy the story and make connections. And that in itself is reading comprehension. Please, please, please don't use those worksheets. You know those worksheets? If you've been to school here, you know about those worksheets. The passage and then the endless question after question after, please. That was used as an assessment tool. Now it's used for crowd control. We don't need crowd control in our homes. Don't use those. You just talk to your kids after you read a story to them, talk to them, have a conversation. It's the best, it'll be the best part of your day, most relaxing part of your day, but don't use those worksheets, please. They're terrible. This is Andrew Pudawa. The reason so many kids are struggling with reading comprehension is because they are lacking that extensive database of language that must be built up auditorily. Reading on their own will not improve comprehension. So if you're concerned about reading comprehension, the only way that the child will build their comprehension level is by reading to them or having them listen to books that are above what they can read. Okay, so a little bit, because I'm such a proponent of reading aloud, I just wanted to talk very briefly about beyond the academic benefits of reading aloud. It's a really strong, wonderful platform, a vehicle that we can use to connect with our kids. And I know that that might sound weird, that you're homeschooling and you don't connect with your kids. Surprisingly, it can strain the relationship sometimes because you're with them all the time, and it can be a stressful situation. So you have to be very intentional about making connections with your kids. So I have a book that I read separately with my son and one with my daughter, and then we have a family read aloud. We do 3 chapter books simultaneously so that I have an opportunity to connect with each child individually and that we're fostering that relationship. It's really, really, really important to foster that relationship with our kids. SubhanAllah, with homeschooling, loving and connecting with my kids has been the biggest challenge and also the most thrilling privilege of my life. And you will feel that also, but it's an intentional journey. You have to be very intentional about connecting with each child, separately. It also, what I really, really love about, I don't know what I wrote here, not sim, that was obviously a mistake. Weaving our faith into the stories that we read, meaning our deen, akhlaq, weaving that into the stories we read because, and I like to do this in all areas of study, because our religion is something we live. You shouldn't just have Islamiyat during Islamiyat time. You should be talking about Islam all the time. So whenever we're reading a story, like my daughter, remember when she was very little, a Harry Potter character, she pulled him out and she was talking about how Allah will see the things, even though people didn't see, Allah will see. Like, she made that connection. It was a Harry Potter character, okay? But like, she made that connection. That's the power of using our deen to talk about the story. So even if these stories are not Islamically geared, there's so much conversation to be had in these stories about, our religion, the moral action of a character, how is this going to affect their deen. It needs to be organic. Our religion needs to be something organic, and it's something that we're living every single day, and that's how I use these stories. All the stories we share, we're having a conversation about what would be the implications of this on our akhirah, what would be the implications of this, whatever, it's just a really, really wonderful way to talk about, our deen. And I'm working on a project. I've been working on this project for several months. I'm trying to compile a book list of the different books that I've read with my family. I wanted to at least get 50. So we're getting there, inshallah. And then I would like to make a kind of a way for parents that are apprehensive about talking to their kids about books, because it can kind of be, hard to start that question. And I think once you start, you get better at it and better at it. But I just wanted to have book lists and then kind of questions that would open up the conversation. So inshallah, that will be on our website on MHE. And inshallah, all of these notes, the language arts notes, will be on MHE, inshallah. And then nurtures empathy. How much our world lacks empathy, caring for other people, other kids. This is all part of, I don't know, I'm sorry, this is not academic and it's not about language arts, but what a benefit of our time with our children is that we're building empathy with our kids. And I don't remember the quote, my little sister told me the quote, you read a book, you're living 1,000 lives, or something like that. It's, how else can we experience 1,000 lives, and how else can we show our children other experiences than reading it through narrative? So that is my personal, because for me, academic benefits is not enough. If I'm spending that kind of time with my kids, I need more than just the academic benefit. And you'll see, subhanAllah, when you're homeschooling, academics really take a second place next to your relationship with your child and their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You'll see that, inshallah. Okay, so this is a really powerful statement that Jim released. I brought this book called the Read-Aloud Handbook. I think every parent should read it, whether you're homeschooling or not. I made my little sister read it when she was pregnant, and she's really, mashallah, she's here. She reads every day to an infant. Every day. SubhanAllah, she's amazing. She's reading to her infant like more than an hour a day. But anyways, the book is there. It's an outdated copy, but I really think everybody should read this. But in that book, he suggests that the academic benefits alone of reading aloud are so great. If someone invented a pill to deliver those benefits, there would be a line miles and miles to get it. Parents would fall over themselves and pay enormous amounts of money to give their kids the benefit of this pill. And subhanAllah, sometimes it's just almost too easy, right? To give something that's so beneficial, but it's just reading. Like, oh, how can it be that powerful? But subhanAllah, and we want some like amazing big answer, but It's really that simple. Just read to your kids. That's it. And it's going to be, there's more than academic benefits, but subhanAllah, it's, so everybody's going to go home and start reading to their kids, right? Inshallah. Okay. And the 1985 Commission on Reading cited, the single most important activity for building knowledge required for eventual success in reading is reading aloud to children. This seems really outdated, so I just wanted to check what they say now. So now they say it's not just reading that it's going to contribute to, its success extends to all areas of study. But it's still the single most important activity. SubhanAllah. So the bottom line, the whole recovery of literacy depends on the parents and teachers making it a much higher priority to read aloud to children of all ages across the board. I was talking to Auntie Sabana's mother-in-law, who's she's a sub, and she was telling me that they don't read aloud at all in schools anymore. They just don't have the time, so sending your kids to school, because I remember after recess we got read aloud too. That was something that our teacher did with us, but it doesn't exist anymore. And even just 10 minutes, that was the best part of our day. I loved that part when they would read to us. So unfortunately, the school system, they have too much. I feel so deeply for teachers because they have administration just breathing down their neck, and just every turn, it's very difficult for them. So this is our job to make sure that we're reading to our kids, and we cannot put it on anybody else. And it's actually so fun. Make it like a fun part of your day. Start practicing your character voices and enjoy it with your kids. I really do enjoy this part of my day. I don't enjoy any other part like I enjoy reading aloud to them. Oh, and the biggest mistake is when we stop reading aloud to children who are older. Now, the research shows that teenagers are amongst the most impacted reading aloud. They need it more than the little kids, and we're always reading little kids' stories. That's normal. But the older kids they're actually saying even adults from here, it can actually I don't remember what it said, but it was something about it was recovering grief and damage that was psychological damage. Reading aloud is so powerful for even adults. So don't stop just because your kid can read that book. He can read Hobbit. He should do that himself. No, it's more beneficial for you to read the book to the child. It's all about your child auditorily listening and picking up those words. And also, I said this before, but be very picky about what you're reading. Don't read Captain Underpants to your kids. Be very, very careful with what you're reading. I really research the books I read before. That's why I want to make this list. I'm very, very careful about what we're reading. I don't want to read any filth or anything less than absolutely wonderful, because my child's time, my time is all very precious. So they are getting high quality literature when they're getting it. And they'll enjoy it very much also. So speaking is the second art of language arts we talked about. So actually, speaking, reading, and writing, they're all a function of the auditory acquisition. So whatever they're picking up from the sounds that they're receiving, that is what they will write like. So obviously, the ultimate goal we have in Read Aloud is, at least academically, is so that they can write well. So if you think about the process of writing, we're actually speaking to ourselves before we write. We think about what we want to say. 10 minutes? Oh my gosh, okay. So we think about what we want to say, we make sure it makes sense, and then we hold it in our mind long enough so that we can put it on paper or wherever. This is actually the model that we're using in co-op. It's IEW. It's before the child puts it to paper, the child is required to do it as a speech in front of their peers. So it's a really awesome time to see the child, the most quiet child, mashallah, blooms in within a span of a few weeks. But yeah, that's prerequisite to writing. So whatever you're doing with your child, make sure that they're first narrating it to you. So, I'm sure some people have heard of narration. British educator Charlotte Mason, which is a whole homeschooling methodology. She's amazing if you want to read up on her. She would say to stop and, have the child recall what they said and have their own opinions inserted and just kind of summarize what they talk about. So this was the idea. This is what you essentially want to do. So when you're doing like a long chapter, break it and just ask the child, okay, so what did you think about that? What did we just read? And narrate, have them narrate, because if you're going to have them write something, you want them to first speak about it. Have that blueprint in their mind first before they write it down. And discourage your child to use the words exactly that they heard. Have them use their own words, make their own connections, their own opinions inserted. So that's narration. And so I can't talk too much about the value of memorization and recitation, but Andrew Pudawa, he's very, we will start doing this in co-op next year, inshallah, but it moves the vocabulary of a child from passive to active. So they're actually engaging with that conversation, with that vocabulary. It's really important, even if you're at home, you don't have to be at a co-op. Give your child the opportunity to practice whatever they're gonna write in front of the crowd. Like I just make, like whenever Adam's doing it at home, we all just sit on the sofa and we listen to whatever speech he has to give. It's not always riveting. Whatever he has to say, you know, he says it and then afterward he will write it. But he has to speak about it first. So it's really nice. IEW works really well in a co-op setting, I have to say that. But it works at home. Or if you're not able to join a co-op, when you have family gatherings, you know, that sounds awkward, but they'll get used to it. Have your child speak in front of them at family gatherings and things like that. Unfortunately, in the school system, public speaking, I was never taught public speaking, by the way. Yeah, this is all self-taught. It's not even taught till high school. That's really unfortunate because children are already so awkward in high school. They don't want to get up in front of a crowd and speak. So Andrew Pudawa says to start at age, grade 1 or 2, like first or second grade is the best time to start, so that your child is really comfortable with talking in front of crowds, because this is a very nerve-wracking thing to do. Okay, and then so the summary for speaking, have the child speak about whatever he plans to write. You know, narrations and everything aside, whatever the child is planning to write, have them brainstorm with you orally. And they need to talk about it with you. So you can either do it as an outline in a speech, like IEW, or as a narration, summarizing, and then with their own opinions inserted. So that's actually, I'm done. Okay, so we understand the correlation of listening to reading and speaking to writing, inshallah. Okay, so I can take questions. Yes. I'll tell you what we're reading right now, which is amazing. It's called it's a 6-book series, The Incorrigible, you want to tell them? Ashton Place, The Incorrigible Children of Ashton Place. But don't read it to them. You need to get the audiobook, because the narrator, she should win an award. She's amazing. We're captivated when we're listening to her. So I think it's done so well on Audible. I'm sorry, I know I'm out of time. One more? Can I do one more? No more? Yes. So open-ended, don't ask specific questions like what color was he wearing, because like that's the kind of silly stuff that we were tested on. It does not help comprehension. Open-ended questions that makes the child think deeper, those are the kind of questions you want to ask. And that'll all, inshallah, be in this. This is a very overview. I will have an article coming out on MHE about this and talking points, inshallah, like the conversation you're having, little talking points. Yes. I mean, I would say keep the narrations and then so the KWOs that you're doing, the keyword outlines in the IEW, be really consistent with those. More KWOs than the actual writing process. Have him speak to you more than, because obviously if he's not struggling in writing, have him do speeches with you. Okay, I'm done. I'm so sorry. I'm taking Zeba's time now. Jazakallah khair. I'm here, so ask me questions if you guys need me. Okay, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.